Ma'am, to be clear, did this encompass everything that was told to you about the process, any agreements, lack of promises, all of those things?
Yes.
Objection vague.
All right, I'll overrule the objection.
And ma'am, ultimately, did you give an interview at the Greeley Police Department with Detective Jerry Burroughs
Yes.
at a later time? All right. Ma'am, in a moment, we're going to speak about October 3rd. I want to know, what are you feeling right now in terms of nervousness?
I don't know. I'm just, I guess, like ready.
Okay, you're ready? Are you nervous?
Yeah.
Are you scared?
Objection relevance.
I'll allow the question.
No, not really scared.
Okay. You've outlined the relationship with Stacy Rodriguez leading up to October 3rd. To the best of your memory, starting at the beginning of that day, can you describe to this jury what you were doing, who you were with, and then we'll discuss how that involves Stacy Rodriguez later, okay?
Okay. So on October 2nd, I went to a birthday party, and it was my friend's kids' birthday, and she had twins. And so me, my sister, and my kids' dad, and our kids, we all went to the birthday party. I left probably around 8 o'clock, I want to say. And me and my sister went to another party. It was our friend's birthday in Johnstown. And so me and my sister were there. I was driving, and I wasn't drinking too much over there because I knew I had to drive back to Greeley. So me and my sister stood in Johnstown for a couple hours. I had left around maybe 11:30, 12 from over there, and at this time, Stacy's already texting me and wanting to know, 'cause she wanted to go out, and she's just texting me, asking me where I'm at, and when I'm gonna be coming back, and so when I get back to my mom's house, I drop off my sister and I meet up with Stacy, and she's picking me up in her mom's car, the Malibu. And so when I get in the car, that's when I start drinking more heavily, and she's drinking, and it's probably like 12:30 at this time, and we go to Cubetas in downtown Greeley, and we're there, and we're just kind of just drinking and stuff, and I ended up seeing my kids' dad. He was there also, and I think that's kind of got Stacy more.
Objection. This is narrative.
I'll sustain that objection right now, Mr. Praley, if you'll just frame the answer a little bit here.
Okay. You go to Cubetas. Who do you see at Cubetas?
My kids' dad, Javier.
Okay. And what reaction did that have on the defendant?
Objection relevance. And
Right.
also when we approach.
Yes.
May I proceed?
Yes, go ahead.
So what was the defendant's reaction once you got to Cubetta's and saw the father of your children?
She was mad. She thought that I knew he was gonna be here, and she was just really upset about that.
I want to go back before we go forward. You had talked about a few things, these different parties that you had gone to, one being in Johnstown. Okay. And you had said you were drinking a little bit, but you knew you had to drive. What were you drinking?
I think I had a couple White Claws.
Okay. And then you had progressed in the story to say that Stacy was waiting on you once you got back to your mother's house and that she was wanting to go out.
Yeah,
Was that wanting to go out to the bars or somewhere else?
to the bars.
Okay. And then you had talked about then you started drinking more. Were you the only one drinking, or was Miss Rodriguez drinking as well?
She was drinking as well.
Okay. What were you guys drinking?
My sister had a Hennessy bottle, and I had asked her when I dropped her off, 'cause she didn't drink much of it, if I can buy that off of her. And some, I think it might have been White Claws, like a little 6-pack or 12-pack of those. And I bought those off of my sister. And so we were drinking that.
Okay. And by we again, that's dealing with the defendant and yourself.
Yes.
Okay. Then you go to Cubetta's and you express the fact that the defendant got angry about Javier being there.
And she was kind of already mad because I was taking long in Johnstown and it was already getting late. And so she was already feeling some type of way.
All right. So at the timing as to how long it took,
Yeah.
and then also to the fact that Javier was present at the first bar you guys go to.
Yeah.
Did you know he was going to be there?
No.
Okay. All right. Progress from there. Tell us what happened.
We were at Cubetta's. It didn't seem very long. And we were just drinking. And I remember when it was closing, we were just kind of asking people around if there was any after parties. And so we get in the car and we still have the Hennessy bottle and we're drinking that. And she's driving and we're kind of going around, just driving around the bar, and everybody's just kind of hectic and stuff. And that's when she sees Christopher and he's walking, and she tells me, should we ask him if he knows any after parties? And I was like, sure. So she rolled down her window and asks him, like, do you know if there's any after parties going around? And he was like, no, but I have beer.
Objection, hearsay.
Mr. Praley, any response?
As to Mr. Dickerson's,
That's what I understand the objection to be, is that
Yes.
right? Yes.
807?
Was that? I'm sorry, can the parties approach? Praley, go ahead and continue.
Ma'am, as to the discussion with Mr. Dickerson, to be clear, prior to that point in life, had you ever met Christopher Dickerson?
No.
Okay. If we could publish People's Exhibit 88. Ma'am, we have a Malibu, and would that be Mr. Dickerson?
Yeah.
Okay, and you had just described that the windows rolled down, that there's this discussion that happens about an after party.
Yeah.
And asking specifically him for one. And based on his response, what effect did that have on you to actually go to his residence?
He said he had beer and drinks at his house, so that's when we decided to go.
Okay. To go back in this conversation, who initiated this conversation about an after party?
Stacy.
Okay. So Stacy asked Chris to go to an after party.
Yeah.
Okay. And Stacy was asking you about trying to find an after party.
Yeah.
So under any circumstance, did Mr. Dickerson walk by and say, hey, girls, you want to come to my house without you guys ever talking to him?
No.
Okay. All right. So after Stacy, the defendant, asked Christopher about the after party and gives his place, or how did that progress? Tell us.
He said that he parked down the street and if we wanted to follow him to his house. And so that's what we did.
Okay. And so at that point, are you just watching him, like walk? Like to where he's parked, I guess?
I don't really remember watching him, but yeah, she kind of drove to follow him where his car was parked.
Okay. So for example, if we could show People's Exhibit 90. Ma'am, this was taken right outside the Rio, and you can see that was Mr. Dickerson walking. And then in 91, it's been discussed that there's a reflection up in the windows of the Chevy Silver Malibu. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Does that look right?
Yeah.
Okay. So after that, do you ultimately then follow him to his place?
Yeah.
Okay. Take it from there. Describe what happens once you get back to his place.
We go inside, and I remember him having Budweiser, and I didn't really drink beer, and I did have a couple Budweisers there, and I remember his dog being there, and we sat on the couch, and we were just kind of making small talk. I remember he was getting a lot of phone calls, and somebody that he had seen at the bar, or his friend or something, was asking him to pick her up, to give her a ride. And I think at first he was kind of denying the phone calls, and he was on the phone with her at one point, and he kind of asked us like if it was okay if we can go pick her up. And we were like, yeah, and so we were just kind of trying to figure out what car to go in, and it seemed okay at first. I do remember when I was sitting there, I texted my sister, and I sent
Objection,
her.
narrative.
I'll allow the witness to continue to answer.
I texted my sister while we were sitting on the couch, and I just sent her a quick picture. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're at some random guy's house. I keep my location on. And I was like, and I have to tell you something. And that was gonna be like my kid's dad was at the bar and stuff. And she's like, okay.
Objection, hearsay.
Mr. Peralta.
It's context for the other side of the conversation.
It's still
All
hearsay.
right. It doesn't sound like it's for the truth of the matter asserted, so I'll overrule the objection. The witness can continue.
You can answer, man.
And so she was like, okay, be careful, and I gotta tell you something too. And I was like, okay. And so after, I was just, after that, that's when he was getting the phone calls, or maybe during. And so we were trying to figure out what car to go in. And so when we had first got there, Stacy parked in the driveway. And so we ended up, we're just gonna take his car. So I went out to move the car, and then I went back into the garage, and we got in his car, and me and Stacy sat in the back, and he was driving. And so,
Let me go through some of that. I appreciate you going through that. When you first go in, you said there was some small talk. Generally, what are you guys discussing?
I do remember at one point we were outside and in the backyard, and I don't know if it was before or after when we came back. I'm pretty sure it was before, and we were just talking about JBS and like working, and I remember him saying that he had an interview or something about his work going on, and so, but I do remember that, you know, he was asking me the questions, and you know, Stacy would kind of be like, oh, well, I work at JBS, and he was still kind of turning the, you know, conversation towards me.
Okay.
I noticed that, and so I was kind of trying to bring her in the conversation too, so she wasn't, you know, wouldn't get mad or anything. And
So he was showing more attention to you than the defendant.
yeah,
Okay. You said you're not really a drinker of beer, but that there were Budweisers.
yeah,
Now, to be very clear, there's different types of Budweiser products. There's like Bud Light, or there's like Budweiser, sometimes called Bud Heavy, right? Which ones do you think it was, if you remember?
I just remember it said Budweiser, and it was a dark bottle.
Okay.
It was glass bottle.
A dark bottle. Yeah. Okay. And then you had discussed his dog. What do you recall about his dog?
His dog was really happy.
401, 403.
All right, I'll overrule the objection.
What color was it?
He was white.
Okay. Said the dog was happy?
Yeah, when he got home.
Okay. And then in terms of that time period, you said that he kept getting calls or something from a friend, and then that progressed to picking that person up.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to outline this time period that you've just discussed. I mean, you're at this individual's house that you've never met before. You're introducing each other essentially, and you guys are drinking.
Yeah.
Is everybody drinking?
Yeah.
Okay. And during this initial encounter, who is Chris giving his attention to?
Mostly me.
Okay. Then there's a discussion of this friend ultimately in going to pick her up. You had transitioned that to then it came down to who was going to drive,
Yeah.
right? And so in order for Chris to drive, the Malibu had to be moved, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Where was it moved to?
In front of his house, like on the street.
Okay. During this time period leading up to this, had Mr. Dickerson ever been violent towards either you or the defendant?
No.
Okay. Had Mr. Dickerson ever sexually assaulted you or the defendant during any encounter of this?
He did slap my butt twice
Okay.
during, like when I would just stand up, he was just kind of like, it seemed like if he was just too happy, like really, you know, just too over, just, you know.
So to be clear, during this initial time, Mr. Dickerson did touch your butt.
Yeah.
And did you take that in a very overtly sexual way?
No. I mean, I was just kind of more scared of Stacy seeing, because I didn't want her to.
Objection.
What's the objection?
404B.
All right, I'll overrule.
404.
I'm sorry?
404B, A and B.
All right, the court will overrule the objection.
Okay. Well, you can answer, number one. Go ahead.
I was just kind of more nervous, like scared that Stacy was going to see that and get mad.
Okay. Did you view this as like a massive event or a minor event at the time?
Just minor.
Okay.
You know.
And ultimately, then, does this trip to go pick up the friend happen?
Yeah.
Okay. Describe You had stated that you guys both sit in the back of the car. Okay. Why'd you guys both sit in the back of the car?
I didn't want to sit in the front, and I don't know if I don't know why she sat in the back. I think it was just more, I don't know.
Okay. Why didn't you want to sit in the front?
'Cause I don't, I don't know. Maybe it's because I didn't know him.
I'll withdraw it.
Okay.
I
You didn't know.
Yeah,
Did you also know that you guys were going to pick someone up?
yeah,
Okay. Did you know the person that you were going to pick up?
no,
Okay. Do you recall who you actually picked up?
no.
Can you describe them just generally as a person?
I know it was a female, and she had a lot of stuff. And when she was getting in the car, she was just kind of throwing her bags in the car, like big duffel bags. And she just was kind of like really kind of loud and just, you know.
Can you give any other descriptors of her? I mean, was she short, tall?
I didn't really see her because when she got in the car, her bags were like on us, like she was throwing them in the back seat. And I honestly didn't really look at her to see how she really looked.
Okay. Tell us about that ride. What was it like? Were you guys talking, or was there music playing?
Yeah, it was fun because he had a system, and we were kind of he was just playing music and driving. We weren't really talking because the music was loud, and we were drinking. I think I had my beer, or I had something with me, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it was fun,
Okay. So when you're talking a system, just for clarifications, are you referring to like a speaker system, like with subwoofers?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so it'd be pretty difficult to have a meaningful conversation with that kind of bass.
Yeah.
Okay. You had said it was fun and you were drinking. Mm-hmm. From what you could see, was the defendant drinking as well?
Yeah.
Did she ever say anything to you to indicate that it wasn't fun for her?
No.
Okay. All right. Ultimately, you said you do go pick up this female. There were bags. You put them in. Where do you go after that?
He dropped her off. I don't know where. I don't remember where he picked her up or where he dropped her off.
Okay. But a pickup happened, a drop-off happened.
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys, again, are still in the back drinking.
Yeah.
Okay. After she is dropped off, where do you guys go?
We go back to his house.
Okay. Describe what happens once you get back to the house.
That's kind of when we started drinking more, and he brought out a bottle, and it was clear. It was probably like this, a pretty good sized bottle. And so he was pouring the shots, and that's when we kind of started just drinking more heavily.
You had motioned approximately a foot. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Like a larger container? Mm-hmm. And what type of alcohol, if you recall, was it? You had said clear.
Yeah, I know it was vodka.
Okay.
I don't remember the name.
Okay. At that point, though, the drinking had escalated.
Yeah.
Okay. Describe how that was happening. Who was providing the drinks? Who was taking the drinks? Anything going on, if you can just state it.
At first, he was the one that was pouring us the shots, and it was pretty good size cups. They weren't normal shot cups. And, yeah, and so we were just kind of just there, and I think he had music playing, and, just kind of talking. And then at one point, I remember Stacy starts pouring the drinks or the shots, and she was giving him full cups. And I remember her putting water. I don't know if I actually saw her putting the water, but mine tasted like it wasn't strong, and ours was like just a little bit.
Okay. So I want to go back through some of that. You said Chris was initially pouring the shots, and then you clarified that when we're talking, we're not talking like shot glasses. These are actually in cups.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you were taking those that you saw Chris had poured.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, it transitioned into the defendant was pouring the drinks. And you recall that yours then began tasting different.
Yeah.
Okay. And you had mentioned water. Why do you believe water was involved?
Because it didn't really taste like alcohol. And I remember she was in the kitchen when she was doing them, so I just kind of assumed that it was water.
Okay. And was Mr. Dickerson finishing those bigger cups that were described?
Yeah, and she was kind of like, let's take another shot, like cheering him on, and, and it was just kind of like, and like making it like a party kind of.
So there was encouragement for Mr. Dickerson to drink more.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you describe at that point, what was the level of your intoxication?
I would say I was pretty drunk, but not to the point where I was like blacked out.
Okay.
And I still I knew my limits, and I wasn't wanting to over drink, I guess, because I was at somebody's house I didn't know, and so I didn't want to
Okay. What would you describe Mr. Dickerson's level of intoxication at that point?
He was getting really drunk. He was starting to like kind of stumble, and I don't know if I remember him slurring his words, but he was definitely stumbling around.
Okay. So by stumbling around, didn't look very coordinated.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the defendant's level of intoxication?
She seemed drunk also. I could tell on her face because she would make like a certain face when she was really drunk, and when she would be on her phone, like her face would just be different than normal. That's how I would always tell them when she was drunk.
Okay. And so at that point, after this alcohol was going around and there were the varieties of these drinks being poured, you noticed all these levels of intoxication. Can you describe for the jury then what happened after this in terms of what you saw and what you heard?
I do remember at one point of the night, I didn't notice this before we had left, but I noticed it when we came back. In his kitchen, he had a table and a bunch of papers, and there was this thing, and it had white tape wrapped around it, and that ended up being the murder weapon. And I noticed it, and I was kind of like, I didn't notice it before. I mean, it could have been there. I don't know, but I kind of got scared, and I showed Stacy. I was like, look, like it was just out on, and it reminded me of a knife sharpener, and so it was just laying on top of his papers. And then at one point in the night, I remember he went outside in the front to let his dog out, and Stacy was out there with him. I think she was smoking a cigarette. And I remember going back into the kitchen and putting just papers on top of that thing, because I don't know why I did that. And then I stood inside, and I was standing in the doorway just so like he wouldn't think I was, looking around in his things and stuff. And yeah, I remember that point.
Okay, you had seen this item and it had a white tape or a handle on it, and you said it looked like a knife sharpener.
Yeah.
Okay. You said you saw it out on that table by the papers and you saw it and you got scared. Why did you get scared?
I don't know. I mean, maybe because it was just unusual, something I never, like if it was a knife sharpener, it would be in the drawer. I mean, I would think, it was just odd to me to see that.
Okay. You see it. I want to be clear. Had Mr. Dickerson ever held that object in any way, shape, or form?
No,
Had there ever been discussion with Mr. Dickerson about that object in any way, shape, or form?
no,
Had he threatened or discussed it at any point during that night?
no,
Okay. You simply saw it,
yeah,
but you shared that information,
Objection leading.
All right, I'll overrule the objection.
but you shared that information with the defendant.
yeah,
Okay. And so at that point, do you have personal knowledge that she knew specifically of that item that you've described?
yeah,
Okay. You stated the victim and the defendant went outside to smoke.
yeah.
Approximately how long was that?
I don't think very long. I mean, maybe a couple minutes.
Okay. And then can you describe, once they returned inside, any progression that would have happened that night in terms of an argument?
Yeah, it had to been soon after they came back inside. We were in the living room, and I remember they just started arguing, and I don't remember what it was about. I don't remember kind of, like what exact words were being said, but I do remember Stacy was up against the wall, and Christopher was just kind of like over her and just kind of like bearing over her. And I remember kind of like stepping in, like wanting to like get him off of her. And that's when she pushed him. And she pushed him off of her. And I think he fell, he stumbled and got back up. And he started yelling, and I remember him just saying to get out of my house. And that's all I remember saying, or him saying. At one point she pushed him on the couch and grabbed a beer bottle and wanted to hit him with it. And I told her, no, like, let's just leave. We could just leave, And she just looked at me and threw the beer bottle. And then she grabbed another one and threw it again on his face. And I just remember him just laying there, and it was just kind of like, he was just kind of bleeding. And she grabbed another one and threw it again at him on his face. And at this point, she's on top of him, like with her like knees, like using her weight on top of him. And then she tells me, she goes, go get that thing. And so I went and I just grabbed it and I just gave it to her. And then she tells me, go to the other room in the kitchen. And so I went to the kitchen, and that's when I started hearing her stab him. And that's when I realized what she was doing. I just remember hearing, like, it sounded like rubber and bone. And I remember thinking, like, I should leave through the garage. And then she calls me into the room. So I go in there, and she tells me, look. And he was just bleeding. And I remember him like trying to say something. It was like gargle with blood, and his neck was just bleeding. And she tells me, go back. This is the kitchen. And so I did. And I just heard the noise again. And then she comes into the kitchen and she's like, look. And it was broken. Her face was just like lit up. Like she was just so happy. And I remember thinking at that very moment, like, I can't show no fear. And she starts going through the drawers in the kitchen, and she gets a knife, and she goes back, and I don't know if she tried to stab him again, but and so after that, I heard noise in the living room, and I went out there, and he was on the floor. He was on the floor now, and I remember her just looking through his pockets and kind of just, she was just in a zone now. She went to his room and starts going through his stuff. And I remember going in there and she's just bringing everything down from his closet. And I remember going around the bed, and on his nightstand, I seen like a gun. I thought it was a gun. And I kind of just showed her it. And she's just taking everything down, going through all his stuff. And I think at this point she noticed that I was just standing there. And so she tells me to go check on him. And so I went back to the living room, and I was just standing there. And I was just watching his stomach rise. And him laying. And then his stomach just stopped. And she gives me this backpack with a bunch of stuff in it. And she tells me, go to the car and start the car and wait for me. And so I did. And that's when I started just kind of freaked out. Like I wanted to call my sister. And I just waited for her. And she gets in the car. And she just tells me to drive. And she's just saying right, turn left, turn right. And we didn't speak. And then we pull into the gas station. And she gives me $1. And she tells me to put this mask on and to go in there and pay for gas. And so I did. And I walked out, and I seen her filling up 2 water bottles, 2 regular sized water bottles full of gas. I got back into the driver's seat, and she got in the car, and she tells me, go back. And that's when I kind of figured she was gonna burn his house. And I go back, and she tells me, leave the car and drive, and to wait for her. And so I did. And she came back out, and